Hey everybody, and welcome again to Ancient Ways for Modern Days. My name is Mike Freeman, and I'm so thankful to have you joining me today as we take a quick look at this one chapter book, the book of Philemon. Now, a few basics. Paul is writing to Philemon, who is a slave owner in the first century, and he's writing to Philemon about a runaway slave. Now, Paul knows Philemon. They've partnered in ministry in the past, and likely Paul led Philemon to Christ. And now there's this slave who has run away, and in his escape, he has met up with Paul somehow. And in that, he's come to faith. He is now part of the household of God. And so Paul is writing this letter. Now, I know we think slavery and we just automatically go to, early American history, but this is first century. Paul is writing this to a slave owner on behalf of a slave. But he's talking about everyone as if they're brothers in Christ. And he's making an appeal to Philemon to really ultimately let Onesimus, the slave, to let him be free, to not hold anything against him. And so look at this letter. And there's a lot of different things we can look at here. But what I want us to see is the expectation Paul has for a brother in Christ, that brother in Christ in fact does the right thing. That he in fact has an affection and has a desire to please the Lord and to do what's best in this situation, not just what is maybe convenient for him. Let me show you what I mean. If we jump in here, just kind of picking up really halfway, almost to the end of this book. Verse 17, Paul says, he says this to Philemon. So if you consider me your partner, receive him, Onesimus, as you would receive me. If he has wronged you at all or owes you anything, charge that to my account. Now look at what Paul says here. He says, whatever he's done wrong, whatever he owes you, I'll pay it. Verse 19, I, Paul, write this with my own hand. I will repay it, to say nothing of you owing me, even your own self. Now here, this is interesting. What Paul does here is he says, I will repay it, which shows as believers our the Spirit-led generosity that exists in our lives. We should be led by the Spirit to be generous, especially on behalf of a fellow believer. He says, I'll take care of that. But Paul, notice here, he says, just, to say nothing of you owing me, even your own self. Paul's reminding him that this man was led to Christ by Paul. Now, Paul, in a sense, he's putting this man on the hook to live a life of gratitude. He's putting this man on a hook to put his Christian faith in action. Well, let's keep going. Let's look at the next few verses. Verse 20, it says, yes, brother, I want some benefit from you in the Lord. What benefit is it that he wants? Refresh my heart in Christ. Now, what would be refreshing to Paul's heart in Christ? What would be refreshing is that if Philemon welcomed Onesimus as a brother, potentially even freed him from his slavery, looked at him not as a second-class citizen, but looked at him as a brother in Christ. What would refresh Paul is that if Philemon lived a life of generosity, a life of faith, a life of caring for others, this is the expectation Paul has. This is what he has as expectation for Philemon, and this is the expectation we should have for each other. Verse 21, he says, confident of your obedience, I write to you, knowing that you will do even more than I say. This is the expectation Paul has that Philemon, as a born-again, Spirit-filled believer, desiring to honor God the Father and to live like Jesus Christ, that this man will in fact go above and beyond to show his trust in the Lord, to show his affection and love for Paul, and even to show his affection and love for Onesimus, a runaway slave, a man who has cost Philemon, a man who, this might not make sense in our first world or in our 21st century world, but a man who has wronged Philemon. Paul is asking this man who is wronged to forgive, restore, and even go above and beyond. This is what happens when Jesus is at work in our lives. We're willing to forgive even when people have wronged us. We're willing to change our lifestyle, even our economic patterns. We are willing to go and look at this, do even more. to do even more than what is asked of us. This is a very simple ancient way for our modern day. It's to take that expectation and place it on ourselves. Brother or sister in Christ, born again, Spirit-filled, living in light of the return of Jesus Christ, desiring to honor God and to live with the gospel at the front of your mind. Are you content just meeting a standard? Just being a nice guy? Just being a helpful lady? Brother or sister in Christ, we're called to exceed that. Not for what we can earn, not to say, okay, now God will finally be pleased with me. No, we are called because we've received so much grace and so much mercy. We are now called to live a life of abundance, abundant service, abundant desire to care for others, to go above and beyond for the glory of God. You see, that ancient way of the modern day, it's not to just do the bare minimum. It's not to just skate by. It's not just to say, I've got God's grace, and you know what? I've got God's grace, and so I can kind of just dabble a little bit in Christian service. No, it's to think of ourselves the way Paul thought of Philemon. How did Paul think of Philemon? He says, confident of your obedience. Let me just say this to you right now. If you're listening to this, I'm confident of your obedience. I'm confident that as you listen to these words, I believe, I know that you will do even more than maybe what has been asked of you. That you will step up in your local church. That you will join arms with other brothers and sisters in Christ. You will see a need and you will fill that need. That you will serve the Lord with gratitude, with joy, all because of His grace. This is the ancient way for our modern day.